What's good, guys? Okay, I gotta show you the most insane Titanic theory I've ever seen. I'm literally not even exaggerating. I ran into the room and turned on the camera just because we need to react in real time. So basically, on TikTok, I was getting tagged in this one video like hundreds of times. You guys were all tagging me and I was like, what is this? As it turns out, it is a video talking about a brand new Titanic theory. So I was like, okay, that's probably gonna be good. Let's see what new thing they can come up with. Hey guys, when I'm telling you this is insane, like that is an understatement. This is the most ridiculous thing that I've ever come across. It's obviously so fake, but based on the comments, it seems like a lot of people think it's real. So it's worth reacting to. So let's react to the most insane Titanic theory that you will ever see. I didn't even finish watching the video. We're just gonna watch it together. Before we watch the video, just real quick, guys, don't forget to like and to subscribe to the channel. Here on my channel, we talk about the Titanic, disasters, and other historical events. So if that sounds like something you're into, then this is a place for you. Okay, so as you can see in my mentions over the last like week/2 weeks, I keep on getting tagged in this video. So I was like, okay, what is this? And I see a lot of people asking me, is this real? We need your input, please. Is this true? People just wanting my opinion. So let's take a look at this video. Alrighty, let's do this. Brace yourselves, guys.
My grandfather was a survivor of the Titanic and he told me what really happened on the voyage.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you right there. Typically, as a rule of thumb, within the Titanic community, I've noticed that whenever I hear somebody say, this is what really happened on the Titanic, it's usually followed by something that is extremely outlandish and ridiculous and the furthest thing from the truth. That's just my experience. So let's see what Grandpa here has to say.
I worshipped my grandfather growing up as he was such a strong presence in my life. Even into his later years he could remember conversations he had with people almost 20 years ago. I learned from my mother that he was a passenger aboard the Titanic but refused to ever speak of it with people.
Okay, so I will say that so far this does sound pretty plausible. We know that a lot of people had a similar experience. You know, they survived the Titanic and they were so traumatized that they refused to speak to the relatives about it. So far so good. This seems pretty believable.
I had become obsessed with the story of the sinking as I wanted to do a presentation on it for my school. My grandfather raised his voice at me for the first time in his life after I begged him to tell me the story. He scolded me and I was frightened as I had never seen him act like this.
Okay, just one thing to point out. In this story, he's talking about his grandfather, and it makes it seem as if he's an elementary school child or a high school child. If you're of high school age, recently, in 2020, 2021, 2022, your grandfather would not have been on the Titanic. He would have had to have been your great-grandfather or your great-great-grandfather. So just throwing that out there.
I went to my bedroom and started weeping as I was just so freaked out by what had happened. He came into my room and apologized for the way he acted. I could see the regret on his face as I flinched back from him when he tried to hug me. The next morning I walked downstairs to find him sitting at the table with a look of sadness on his face. He asked me to sit down and I reluctantly agreed. His face had conflicting emotions as he told me that he would tell me what actually happened on the Titanic.
Okay, what actually happened on the Titanic? This is gonna be good, let's go.
He made me promise never to tell anyone as he was worried people might think he was crazy. I sat there dumbfounded as he started telling the story. I was only 7 years old when I climbed on board the Titanic. It seemed so gigantic compared to me and I was struck by how beautiful everything looked. There were so many people everywhere and they were all so friendly and smiling. I stood at the edge of the ship and waved down at the people on the dock as we prepared to set sail. It was one of the happiest moments in my life as I had never felt such exhilaration. My parents ushered me to my room when we were underway as they wanted to enjoy the ship. I knew we had spent most of our money to get tickets as my parents have always wanted to live in America. I began to notice some strange behavior from some of the other passengers in the second day of the cruise.
Okay, so far, pretty believable.
They seemed to be coughing a lot and their eyes were very red.
Okay, what?
My father assured me that it was nothing but I can remember how frightened he looked. He left for a few minutes and came back carrying a wrench and told me it was just for protection.
Okay, this is getting very weird.
I was awoken the next morning by screams coming from the next room. I jumped out of bed and rushed to see what was happening. There was already a group of people standing outside the door and I pushed them out of the way to get a better view. I froze while staring at the contents of the room. There was a man lying on the floor with his stomach ripped open while his 2 young children...
Okay, I'm sorry, what? Wait, what did... There was a man lying on the floor with his stomach ripped open while his two children
seemed to be feasting on his intestines.
Okay. You lost me, and I think you lost every single one of you guys watching, but let's see how far they go with this story. Okay.
I was shoved out of the way as two of the crew rushed in. They grabbed the children and struggled to hold them as the children were like rabid animals. They managed to subdue the children by knocking them out cold.
Bro, we supposed to believe that they just punched some children? That the steward just walked in there, saw them eating some stomachs, and just like, don't do that.
We were ushered back to our rooms so that they could clean up the mess. I wandered the ship for the day and noticed that a lot of people seemed to be very sick.
The stewards are just randomly cleaning the entrails of these victims.
The crew seemed to be very on edge and were always looking around them. I was awoken on the fourth day by screams and running from outside the cabin. I peeked outside and was shocked as the hallway was covered in blood.
Okay, this is slowly turning into like that scene from The Shining. You know when the elevator opens and then all the blood just comes through? What is going on here in third class? I'm assuming it's third class of Titanic. They're talking about immigrating. I don't even know why I'm entertaining the story. I'm just, let's pretend like this is in fact a real theory and not just like a troll. Okay, let's just...
I quickly closed the door and went to wake my parents, but they weren't here. I didn't know what to do as I was afraid to leave the room but was afraid to be by myself. I spent a couple of hours trying to decide what to do.
Yeah, of course you're afraid to be by yourself. You just saw some kids eat some stomachs.
My rumbling stomach finally convinced me that I needed to leave and find some food.
Dude, they're gonna eat your stomach. Your stomach is next.
My grandfather...
Oh shoot, okay. So... Part 1 ends there, so it goes into a part 2. Let's see. Part 2. When I open the comments, I see my name everywhere. People are tagging me to find out if this is true. Okay, let's continue on to part 2.
Find some food. Half the day had already gone and I had just sat here. I crept to the door and peeked out and was relieved to find the hall empty. There were distant sounds of the engines rumbling and the occasional scream. I remembered that there was a kitchen down the hallway which would probably have something in it I could eat. It took an eternity for me to move down the corridor as I was trying to avoid stepping in blood or blood-stained clothes.
Okay, so let's turn into like Titanic, the horror movie or something. Avoid stepping in blood and blood-stained clothes.
I reached the kitchen and almost puked while gazing at the corpses inside. They looked like someone had stabbed them hundreds of times. They appeared to be a mixture of crew members and passengers. I grabbed any food that was close at hand and fled.
What am I reading? For real, this is... I don't even know how to react, man. I already apologize for making you sit through this, but I'm gonna make you sit through this because I'm sitting through this, so. Let's see how this story ends. Does the ship even sink in this theory? JP Morgan's gonna be the one who's doing all the stabbing. That's how I think this theory is gonna end.
I quickly ate the food that I had acquired and began to search the ship. I kept coming across more corpses along each corridor. Many of them looked like they had their stomachs ripped open. It was beginning to get dark and I was starting to get worried that everyone else on board was dead. I rounded a corner and my bladder let loose as a gun was pointed in my face. I stood there shaking as one of the crew gazed at me for a few moments.
Okay, so now the kid just peed his pants because somebody's pointing a gun in his face, but he wasn't peeing his pants when he saw all these dead corpses and whatnot. I'm so confused.
He put the gun away before rushing off and leaving me standing there alone. It took me a while to gather my senses and by this time it was completely dark. I had heard distant gunshots in the direction the crew member had run and wondered what he had shot. I was thrown to my feet as a deafening crash rocked the ship. I ran to the side and gazed out at an enormous lump of ice which we must have crashed into.
Oh, so there is an iceberg. So there's rabid children, corpses everywhere, and an iceberg.
Lumps of ice began to crash down beside me and I had to move away to avoid being hit. I watched the piece of ice disappear off into the distance and wondered how bad the damage was. I heard a noise behind me and was instantly relieved to see my father.
Okay, the parents are back. Where were the parents when this child was watching people being eaten alive?
I began rushing towards him but stopped after seeing his clothes were covered in blood. His eyes locked on mine and I began to shrink back as his gaze was that of an animal and not a human.
Bro, the dad's a zombie now? This is like 28 Days Later, where it's like, it's rabid zombies. It's not just regular zombies, they're rabid zombies. On the Titanic, as the Titanic is hitting an iceberg.
He let out a guttural growl and then began to charge at me. I felt my bladder release once again as I awaited my death.
Okay, so he's peeing again. Okay, so picture the scene. So this scene would be like corpses everywhere, blood everywhere, human entrails everywhere, and now pee everywhere. And the father's just a rabid zombie?
My father suddenly went flying backwards and I turned around to discover the same crew member from earlier still clutching the gun. He looked at me for a few moments and indicated me to follow him. He was moving very quickly and I was barely able to keep pace. He was peeking around every corner and we walked by dozens of corpses. We eventually reached an area with a large number of survivors. Some were attempting to lower the lifeboats while the others were trying to fight off the other passengers who seemed to want to eat them.
The passengers seemed to want to eat them.
They managed to get the lifeboats down and slowly began to evacuate any survivors. The ship at this point was slowly starting to sink and it was desperate trying to get as many people to safety as possible.
Okay, wait, so if all these people have already been eaten, wouldn't that mean that it'd be a lot easier to rescue people since like half the people are already eaten alive, I guess?
Our lifeboat was moving away from the ship and I could see dozens of the passengers rushing backwards and forwards.
Who is manning these lifeboats? Who is preparing this in this theory? Who is rabid and who is a regular crew member that's helping out?
Just attacking each other. The ship had begun to sink beneath the waves and most of the people were at the back of the ship. I turned away as I didn't want to see any more of this. There were sniveling cries from the others on the boat as none of us could understand what had happened. A few hours later other ships arrived and we were rescued.
Okay, right there. A few hours later, other ships arrived and we were rescued. Okay, well, in the real Titanic, it was one ship that arrived and it was a Carpathia.
My mother had survived on another lifeboat and we cheerfully reunited. My mother was offered a substantial amount of money by the owners of Titanic to never say a word and she agreed. I think most of the survivors would rather have forgotten this had ever happened, so it was accepted by everyone.
Okay, and that was the end. First of all, I want to say I do sincerely apologize for making you watch this with me. I watched a little bit of part 1, but I didn't finish watching part 2 because it started to look ridiculous. I figured, okay, let me pick up the camera and you guys can watch this with me, but that was a lot crazier than what I expected. I knew it'd be insane, but I didn't realize it'd be this insane. So, okay, first of all, for everyone asking whether this is real or if this is plausible, let me just clarify so that it is on the record. No, this is absolutely not real. This is not plausible. This is a completely made up theory. Yeah. What is this, like a story time? Let me look at where do they get this from on Reddit? Because this is an account that posts like Reddit stories. Look at the subreddit. It says r/no sleep. I think this is like a subreddit where people make horror stories and whatnot. So, okay, right off the bat, we know that the story is fake. It's a made up story. It's a made up horror story for entertainment. But this is the problem with TikTok, that something will go viral, something that is obviously satire, something that's just made for entertainment. But on TikTok, the algorithm works in such a way that it pushes that sort of kind of shock content. And I think the demographic on TikTok is a little bit younger. So a lot of people, they're just like, whoa, is this real? Let's look at the comments actually. Okay, so a lot of the top comments with the likes, they're pretty fun. Look, it's true. The ice cubes in my fridge said the great uncle's father friend was there. It's true. I'm the Titanic. It's true. I was the children. It's true. I was the dude being eaten. It's not true. They never mentioned Jack and Rose. Okay, so that gives me a little bit of hope for TikTok. You know what I mean? That some people are recognizing that it is in fact just like a made up story. But if we scroll down a little bit further, you have people that are genuinely asking the question whether this was real or not. This is insane. Let me see. How many views does this have? It's 8.8 million views, almost 9 million views on this video, and 767,000 likes. So there you go. That is TikTok for you. And then part 2, 1.8 million views. I think this one wins for the most insane Titanic theory. And we've covered a lot of TikTok Titanic theories that are bizarre on this channel. You guys can see a couple of them here. I'll put a link there. We've covered the popular Olympic switch theory, the Federal Reserve theory, theories that there was no iceberg and it was really the fire. But this one is definitely the most insane. That the theory that some rabid zombies went and devoured the ship as the ship hit the iceberg, and that this was continuing while the evacuation was going on. Anyway, there you have it, ladies and gents. I think this one is definitely the craziest Titanic theory that I've ever seen. And I hope that people don't take it seriously. I see that a lot of people on TikTok are not taking it all that seriously, but I'm a little concerned by the other comments further down there and the amount of people that are asking me, is this actually true? Is this real? No, this is just TikTok being TikTok. All I have to say about this one, guys, is RIP my brain cells. So I thought I would share that with you guys. I didn't think that that's what I would be reading today, but there you go. Now you guys experience that with me. That was fun. I'm gonna go do literally anything else to get this story out of my head. If you guys want to watch some actual, factual Titanic information that isn't made up Reddit stories, then you guys can watch this playlist here. I want to thank all the new Titanic nerds who've recently subscribed to the channel. I really, really appreciate it. Our channel has really been growing, and which is awesome to see, so that we can actually start spreading real facts and real information about the disaster, about the history of the Titanic and its passengers and the survivors. Alrighty, that was quite the experience. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Again, I apologize for making you watch that, but I had to watch it, so you guys had to watch it. The link to all the Titanic Guy merch is in the description, and I'll see you guys in the next one.